Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Android Developer Office Hours. We come to you every week this time at 2 o'clock on Wednesdays. Here today joined by two of our developer programs engineers, Trevor and Alex.
Howdy, everyone.
And hopefully today we'll be able to answer some of your questions. So we have a moderator queue, which we're going to go through. We encourage those of you who have questions to join us in the Hangout. So if you're in our circles, you'll be able to join the Hangout. Just check out the Android Developers stream for the invitation, and we'll try and preference the questions from the people who join us as they come on board. It's good to see some people joining on already. We're going to kick off with the first moderator question. This is from F. Penal in Venezuela, who says, we are developing an application. We need to block our client's outgoing SMS while driving. We got the accelerometer working, but not the blocking of outgoing SMS. Is it possible? Is there a hint you could point to us? Thanks.
So, to my knowledge, I don't think there's actually a way to do this, for the same reason that you can't block outgoing calls. We don't really want people to go and try and write a malicious app that keeps people from calling people. It's generally frowned upon, so that's one of those things that you don't have much flexibility. Now, you can set up apps that will go and intercept the send text message intent and give the user the option to bring your app to the foreground, but you can't go and prevent somebody from sending a text.
Gotcha. So we can't block it, but perhaps an approach you can take is to strongly suggest to users who are doing it not to. So yeah, if you have your own app come up as an option and then suggest that they use that as a default, then I guess that's one way of sort of doing it. But there's no real way of stopping them at all, unfortunately. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, there are some apps out there which do go and provide child lock functionality by doing some tricks that we can't really recommend. They'll go and look through the list of running apps, and when they see other apps in the foreground, they'll go and put their app on top of theirs. Again, not something we generally recommend. So there might be some workarounds if you really want to do this, but nothing that I can actually give you as a best practice.
Yeah. Matt in chat actually asks if airplane mode is an option. It's an interesting idea, but I don't believe you can programmatically set airplane mode.
Yeah, that's right. I think ultimately you're down to if someone wants to send a text message when they're driving, even though that's clearly a very bad idea, I don't think there's anything you can do as a third-party programmer to prevent that from happening without starting to do things which, as Trevor says, are probably not the best approach. So some sort of warning message or something like that which tells people, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, is probably your best option at this point. Let's see if any of the guys in the Hangout have any questions. We've got a few, Matt and Mark. Do you guys have any questions that you'd like to put to us?
Yeah, sure. So I have another download manager question. Currently, we're downloading from our own servers, and it's just using sockets, so not using HTTP, so we rolled our own on everything. But now with the data moving to the cloud, we want to make use of the download manager. So we download just fine. The issue that we're having is if for some reason they don't finish the download, we would like to instruct the download manager when the app starts the next time to finish the download. So I'm wondering, is it possible with HTTP headers in a range to tell download manager to start at some byte offset to finish some download that had started previously?
Okay, actually, I think your question is a little bit further down on the question list, but yeah, so we'll probably get to that in a minute, but since you're there right now, we can actually just answer it right here. So, to my knowledge, the way Download Manager works is it should automatically resume the downloads. So Download Manager runs in the background, not just when your app is running. So it should just, if the user exits your app, goes and does something else, the download should continue. If they lose network connectivity, it should go and resume the download the next time the network comes back up. Download Manager is the same, the same utility used by Android Market to go and download Market apps, and those automatically resume when you come back from a network failure. So it should work the same way. So are we missing something in what you're trying to do here?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what the rules were and how long it's going to try to resume. Like, imagine some of our downloads are fairly large, like 500 megabytes and up. So assume they start something, they're on some Wi-Fi, and then they walk out the door, get in their car, and they lose network connectivity, and they drive home for an hour, and then they get, on the network at home. So you're saying it will automatically, once it's back on the network, restart, regardless of the time that was passed in between?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Now, I'll also mention two other things about Download Manager. One, it is open source, so if you do want to go and double check the logic it's using there, you can go to the Android source code, just search for Download Manager and take a look at it.
Yeah, there's one problem with that. We're running on Honeycomb, and the Download Manager code on Ice Cream Sandwich is different. Apparently.
So the Honeycomb source code is available as well. We just have not tagged it, if I remember correctly, but it is in there. So if you can just look through the commit history and try and find where they actually changed the version string to go and read Honeycomb, that should get, or take a look through the. I'm trying to remember. There's a file that gives you constants for all the different.
Look, it should almost be easier for Download Manager. Didn't we introduce that in Honeycomb?
I think we no, it's Gingerbread.
Is it Gingerbread? Okay. All right. Yeah. So then,
but
yeah.
So there's a file that has constants for each OS release. If you take a look in there and see where we actually added the constant for Honeycomb, it should tell you which commit to look at. All of Honeycomb is there. We just haven't made it easy to find because it's sort of a mess, to be honest.
Sure.
But so the other thing you can do too is so Dan Galpin, a member of our team, took the Download Manager code and then backported it for any device. I want to say all the way back. Was it 1.6?
I think so.
Yeah,
I want to say 1.6.
Yeah.
It was either 1.6 or 2.1.
Yeah, so he took all that code and made it into a library that can be installed on basically any device. And that's shipped as part of the large APK support for Android Market. So if you go into the Android SDK Manager, there's a download there for large APK support. And that'll let you, in addition to all that, it gives you the standalone copy of Download Manager, which you can certainly go and take and add into your own app, which not only will that give you a whatever the latest function, the latest functionality added to Ice Cream Sandwich is as part of your Download Manager implementation. It'll give you backwards compatibility, so if you want to run on something older than Honeycomb, you can. And more importantly, it'll give you your own standalone copy of Download Manager that you can modify. So if there's something about its behavior you don't like, you're certainly welcome to change it. Oh,
okay.
Robert's telling us that it's backwards compatible to 2.3.
2.3.
Okay.
Wait, no, that's Gingerbread, though. I thought Download Manager was added in Gingerbread. We'll have to check on that one.
Yeah, we'll have to check.
I suspect it's not. But
just as a follow-up question, you said you had 500 megabyte files. Do these are these like media, like movies and stuff that change frequently, or are these actually like part of your app, like sound and image assets?
They're a part of the application. The application doesn't really make any sense without the data, and they change every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so you might want to look into every time it changes, do you have the users re-download it?
Re-download the app, means.
We download Delta sets, so
okay.
Yeah, so it's not on the cloud right now, but from our own proprietary servers, we have Delta sets. We know what version you're on, and then we do a binary compare of, okay, this is the new stuff, and we only send you what's absolutely necessary.
Okay, I was going to say you might want to look into large APK or large APK support, but in that case it might be a little tough. So with I don't know if you've looked into large APKs, but in addition to your APK, which can be up to 50 megabytes, we give you 2 slots for large files you can bundle with it. And the usage case there, we imagine, is you put your initial payload into the first slot, and then the second slot is for your patch set. But the idea here is more, you have a patch set if you need it. Now, if you keep pushing out patch sets over and over again, you'd have to go and keep pushing out new APKs, and that might not be ideal.
That's what I was thinking when I asked. I think when we released it, it became Android expansion files.
Right.
Is the term.
Right. This is much more of a subscription model, so the app is essentially free and pretty much usable. It has some demo things in there, but in order to actually use it, you have to have a subscription with our company, and then we push you the data.
Cool.
All right. But yeah, definitely take a look at the Download Manager implementation we bundled with that. It might be useful.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Totally.
All right. See, a couple of moderator questions. Whatever happened to the Android Google Moderator app? It's inconvenient to submit the questions from our phones. I have no idea what happened to
That's a very good question, because I installed it 15 minutes ago on this device, and here it is running just fine. You probably can't see this too well because of the lighting here, but it seems to work just fine for me. So I have no clue what happened to it for you. I will say I don't think it's in the Android market or Google Play. I think you actually have to go and download it from the open source site. But it is available for download, and it does work.
So that may be the answer to your question is it's moved. It's not on Google Play. It's on the open source site for the app.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I believe it's written by a Googler, but it's not in an official Google app. It's just a Googler wrote it in their free time, so we don't really keep track of it. You'd have to. I believe it's hosted on code.google.com, which means you can feel free to ping the developer if it's not up to date or it's not visible for whatever reason.
It's actually not bad. I quite like the app.
Yeah.
All right, we've got another question which we can't answer. Are you planning to fix Google Play Store to show prices, including that, in the EU? Not really a question for us to answer, unfortunately. We're sort of more focused on the developer side, but it's certainly some feedback we can provide the Google Play team and let them know your concerns. Let's see, we've had a couple more people join the Hangout. Jared or Josh, do you guys have any questions you'd like to put to us? Jared, answers with a paste. Nice. Working on a RenderScript-based 3D app, you need to have support for complex multi-touch gestures similar to how Google Earth works, so rotating about 3 axes. Given that 3D effects are handled by RenderScript, should I try and interpret these gestures in RenderScript, or should I implement gesture detectors? What do you guys think?
I don't really have much experience with RenderScript. Intuition would tell me that gesture detectors would be the way to go.
Yeah, I feel like it would probably be quite complicated to figure out in RenderScript, given that you've got some shortcuts available to you already using the gesture detectors.
That was my thinking as well. I just wanted to make sure that I'm actually not too clear on how the motion events work. At what frequency do they update?
Within motion detectors?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Do
Yeah.
you guys know much about how the motion detectors are implemented?
Not really, no.
As far as I understand it, the frequency of the feedback should be as quickly as the touchscreen is able to supply it to the framework.
Okay, well that would certainly be fast enough then. So for, I know there's basically like a pan, swipe, gesture detector built into Android as well as the zoom one. Where should I go about trying to extend that for stuff like 3D rotate?
Where should you be trying to... I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, for example, in Google Earth, you can do like a 2-finger rotate, where it rotates about the center point of the 2 fingers.
Right.
Is that something that is already inherent to an existing gesture detector, or do I need to extend one of the base gesture detectors for that?
Right. I don't think that there is anything like that built in.
Yeah, that's my
I think our gestures are fairly straightforward, sort of, swipey, pulley sort of stuff, rather than sort of complex 3D movements. So yeah, I would say that you'd need to extend the existing gesture detectors to use their logic, but try and be a little clever about how you interpret those sorts of things.
Okay, and I know Google Earth isn't really open source, but is there anything that Google has that might incorporate some of these features as like a best practices sort of way of handling that?
Google Body? Did we open source that?
I can't remember.
I think we
there's
did.
also,
I don't remember.
We gave it to MIT or someone. Right?
Yeah, do we open source SkyMap?
SkyMap, I think both.
SkyMap I know is open source.
Alright.
So
Yeah, so SkyMap and
That'd be-
possibly
that'd be an
Google Body.
interesting place to
Both of them have sort of more complex, 3D gestures. So those two, I definitely check out.
Okay, appreciate it.
No worries. Let's see. Is there a way to use Share Action Provider but disable the shortcut action that is added once an item is pressed?
alas, the answer is no, but in researching this question, I pinged the member of the framework team that built Share Action Provider to ask because I didn't know the answer. And he said currently no, but I put in a feature request on your behalf. Because, yeah.
So maybe later.
Yeah, because initially I was sort of thinking, like, why would you want to remove this obviously useful piece of functionality? But on a smaller screen where real estate is at a premium, there's a good case for it. So the feature request is in. but I can't say anything beyond that.
Your other alternative is to rather than using the full action provider, is to just use like a share. We have a share view or something along those lines, right? Like a slightly more cut down version, which doesn't have all the same functionality.
Yeah,
but
there was
still
the version
includes-
used in Honeycomb.
Which was what was it called? The chooser, I think. Are you talking about the pop-up dialog?
I'm not sure. I'm sure that there was something you could add to the action bar which did much the same but didn't have all of the quite the same
In fact,
functionality.
I think we used it in. Did we use it in Honeycomb Gallery? Did we add a share button there?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
So if it was in Honeycomb, there's a good chance it still exists.
Yeah, you know-
So yeah, I'd give it a try.
We should check. If this is in Honeycomb Gallery, we should add it. A share button of some sort.
Oh, yeah. Probably.
We should probably use share action provider, but
That's
We
true.
should probably change the name because it's backwards compatible now. It's not specific to Honeycomb anymore.
it's true. Fragment Gallery.
Fragment Gallery. There.
Or we could call it Pretty Google Picture Gallery.
Oh, I like that. That's much better. The Pretty
That's
Google
it.
Picture Gallery.
Yes.
It rolls right off the tongue. All right, let's see. We've got a question from Gregory Cook on the stream, and he asks, why are fragments hosted in frame layouts? Related, can fragments be hosted in other layouts? Why do samples declare fragments as public static inner classes? And, well, okay, so there's three questions. Let's focus on the first. Why are fragments hosted in frame layout, and can they be hosted in other layouts? So the answer to both of those questions is they don't have to be in frame layouts. They can be in any layout that you like.
Right. Frame layout just happens to be convenient because of the way fragments are usually used. But yeah, if you want to go and lay them out some other way, feel free. It'll work just fine.
Absolutely, yeah. So generally, you'll see frame layout used in a lot of sample code because it's the easiest way to put it in something
You
without
also
adding
see a lot of
complexity.
use of linear layout too, for the
Yes.
same reason. Because
Yeah.
usually, a lot of times, just have fragments side by side.
Precisely. Yeah, linear layout is another really common one. So yeah, you should see examples of both of those. Why do the samples declare fragments as public static inner classes?
That's a good question.
I'm guessing it's for simplicity, to keep things all in one class,
Yeah.
rather than having things sort of spread around the place. But I don't think that there's any
I don't think there's any reason to
requirement
do
for
it. I
that.
think it's just
Yeah.
just easy.
Yeah.
I think it's just a convenience of sample code as opposed to production code. We try to make our code easy to read and digest, but we're not always optimizing for something that should be copy-pasted into production.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point with sample code. A lot of the time there's a big priority is to try and make it easily parsable so that you can download one file and see everything in sort of one place rather than having to try and figure out how things go together, particularly because I think a lot of the time when people use sample code, they're not necessarily creating the same project. They're just getting some files and it's not obvious how they all fit together. So that's often why we will tend to use things like public static inner classes where it's architecturally there's no real reason for it. And let's see, the last question is, are there any plans for an official map fragment? Related, is Local Activity Manager being deprecated? At one time I would have sworn this class was marked as deprecated. I used this to implement my map fragment class. Is that dangerous? Local Activity Manager. You know, I'm not actually familiar with that class.
I'm not either.
I've not heard of that one.
Interesting. So we'll look into that. I haven't come across it, so I can't comment on whether it's ever been deprecated, but we'll check it out and we'll get back to you on that. In terms of the official map fragment, that's definitely something which we've heard a lot of feedback from people wanting to be able to have map fragments in their support library enabled fragment-based class apps. So it's definitely something we've passed on to the maps team and to the framework team. So hopefully we'll see something, but without a working time machine, we can't tell you if or when that will happen. Okay, let's go back to the moderator. Let's see, this is from Elad in New York. It says, my company is developing a large-scale Android application and we would like to get some usage stats more specific than the ones available on the developer website. Will you be releasing stats like most popular phones sliced by country?
I think in general we don't really release stats like that because it encourages the wrong approach of taking the 10 most popular Android devices and ignoring the rest or something like that. What you want to do is grab test devices that are representative of certain classes. For instance, like a 10-inch tablet, an ICS device, a Gingerbread device, like a small screen, a medium screen, small density, high density, etc. There was actually a really good blog article that Netflix wrote about how they support hundreds or thousands, I don't remember what they said, of devices, but their core of physical devices that they test on is like 10, but they picked them really well based on the types and classes that they wanted to support and covered a broad range, and tested high density stuff on the high density devices, et cetera, et cetera. So if Netflix can do it, you can do it.
Right. Yeah, Netflix tends to be a pretty complicated app.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. Josh in chat has asked me. He mentions that at last year's I/O, I was using a pretty nifty presentation app. His words, not mine. Using a tablet to do the presentation, and
maybe we should call it that. That should be the title to that.
Yeah, I like that. Pretty nifty presentation app. Awesome. That's what it will be called. He mentions that at the time I said that it would be open source. Did something happen with this, or did you just miss it? You didn't miss it. I haven't yet open sourced it. It is still on my to-do list, and the fact that this year's Google I/O is now only a couple of months away is embarrassing. So I plan to use it again this year, and I do plan to open source it. So my plan, for lack of a better word, is to fix it up, get it tidy to the point where it's not an embarrassment to me and my team if I show it to the public, and hopefully get it out there before or shortly after I/O. So no promises, but that is still the plan. The only thing which has delayed it is my own laziness. Scott Kennedy has a question. Scott, do you want to hit us up with a question? Silence. All right, we'll let Scott get to us in his own time. You can certainly type it as well, and we'll respond to it as soon as it comes up. I have a request for Fred behind the booth. Because of the way that moderator presents things, if you scroll down, things will pop above us. So you need to use the arrow key to jump down to new questions so that they're always in the right order. Yeah, done that one. Okay. Android backup service registration doesn't work, and then there is a link to an issue.
So I can answer this one. I fixed it yesterday. It works.
Awesome.
We had a bit of a snafu where when we switched over from Android Market to Google Play, some of the redirects weren't working properly. So we've updated all the links and pushed out all the changes. So everything should be working properly now. If not, let us know. But to our knowledge, everything is A-OK now.
Which means Trevor is so fast at fixing bugs that he goes back in time and fixes it before it's reported to him.
Exactly.
I guess that means our time machine is fixed.
Well, yeah. He's using it for good instead of evil, so thanks, Trev.
I would have used it for evil.
That's why we don't let you have the time
Sports
machine.
betting, lottery numbers. I would have used the time machine.
All right, so if we see you next week, like wearing a solid gold suit, we know what's happened?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, I don't know. I might just do that anyway. That sounds fun.
That would violate the whole don't be evil thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. You can't use a Google time machine for evil.
I'll have to go invent my own.
Or go back in time and change like the motto. That
Right.
would work.
Scratch out the don't.
Exactly. On that note, we've got a couple of people with questions in the Hangout. Do you guys want to speak up?
Yes, I can start. I implemented a UI timer, a countdown, that counts down minutes until it reaches 0, and then it goes boom. No, it doesn't. But the problem is when I do the updates for the timer, if I set it to an interval of 1 second, it only updates the UI every 2 seconds. But if I do the interval every 1 second and a millisecond, it updates correctly the UI.
Interesting. So it can't keep up with a second, but it can, if you set it to less than a second, then it will do it.
No, not less than a second, more than a second, just a millisecond, more than a second.
Oh, like 1 second and 1 millisecond, and then it will update every second?
Yeah.
So 1.001 seconds will work at 1.001, but 1 will work at 2.
Interesting.
That's very strange.
Yeah, that sounds like an odd timing collision issue, where it's just coming up at slightly the wrong interval, not quite fast enough. But that's strange that it would go the other way, that less frequently would make it actually update more frequently.
Yeah, I'd say file a bug about that.
Yeah, that's
b.android.com, so like B as in bugs, b.android.com is the link to our bug tracker. And yeah, definitely an open issue there, and so somebody from the Eng team can look into that.
I had a theory, I'm not sure, maybe I'll share it with you. It is maybe because it's 1 second, it basically loads already the 2 updates together, and then it just pushes the newest one on the GUI, if you see what I mean. Because if like you place 2 GUI things over each other, it only shows the latest one if it updates the UI.
Yeah, that seems reasonable, but again, that would then only work if you did the update more frequently than 1 per second. So if you made it 0.99999 instead of 1, and then that worked, then I would buy it. But if you're making it 1.001 and that makes it work, then that would seem to be counter. So definitely seems something buggy.
So post a bug on Bug Tracker.
Yeah, definitely. We'll keep track of that one as well. That seems very strange. You seeing that across multiple devices?
Just on the devices that I have, which are the Galaxy S2 and the Galaxy Nexus.
Right. Well, that's 2 devices. That's enough to suggest that it's not hardware specific. Yeah, definitely post a bug, and we'll keep track of that one as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Matthew, you are up next, as the chat window says.
Yeah, so I had a question. I've been looking at the source code for the Honeycomb Calendar app lately, and so I've noticed that Calendar Contract was introduced in 4.0, right? And then I noticed in the Honeycomb Calendar app that they're using almost a very similar class called Calendar, just has a different name but has all the exact same constants and whatnot. I was wondering, is it possible to use the constants from 4.0 to use the Calendar API in Honeycomb?
I think that depends on whether or not we did our job properly, and if we did, that class should be marked as non-exported, or that content provider should be non-exported, in which case the answer is no. I mean, you're certainly welcome to try it. At this point, there is a public API in 4.0, and 3.0 isn't changing, so if you can get it to work, cool. Of course, we can't really recommend that you use private APIs if it is accessible. I mean, usually a lot of the way our APIs work is we go and test them internally as a private API, and then once we're happy that things look proper, we'll go and do the extra work to go and turn it into a public API. That gives us time to go and experiment and see what works, what doesn't. Once we go and make something a public API, it's locked down. So there is a good chance those classes are almost identical. I think the big question here is whether or not we've actually gone and set them up in such a way that they're publicly accessible.
Yeah, as you say, I'd be surprised if they were. It's as you say, it's generally the case that you'll see snippets of things which later become public APIs in earlier releases, but yeah, it's generally a case that you can't actually do anything with them until those later releases.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. Thank you.
Let's have a look. Let's go to the moderator queue. Why is there a noticeable latency in Android audio? How can we avoid this in real-time applications, i.e. audio-video chat?
So the answers to why is a very complicated question. Probably
bring your oscilloscope. I think we need an oscilloscope to answer that.
Yeah, or somebody from the media team.
That'll work.
Yeah, I mean there are people whose job is nothing but to go through and work on our media subsystem, and they worry about things like latency quite a bit. As far as how to go and avoid the current latency in real-time applications. There's really not much you can do to get rid of it, but there are ways to go and work with it. So, in particular, you'll want to make sure that whatever you're using for your video and audio stream is properly mixed together when you're sending it to get displayed. So you just send a single RTSP or an HLS stream. If you're generating data locally, it's entirely possible to start up a local web server and just stream content from the device to itself.
What was that?
I've seen a lot of people go and use that to go and stream live video from within an app. And what that'll let you do is make sure that the media system, which is already designed to go and deal with latency and make sure that audio and video play together, is doing its job and making sure everything plays together. If you try and predict the latency, that's a little tough because it does vary between devices.
I've got nothing to add to that. That was a complete answer.
Okay.
Yeah, if you have an app where low audio latency is an absolute requirement, that at the moment is a problem. There's not much you can do. You can set that as a required feature on Android devices, which will just effectively prevent your app being distributed. So,
we did add some API. Is it OpenAL or what's the name of the?
I think that's right.
Yeah, we did add a feature that allows low-level access to the sound system. I want to say it's called OpenAL. Don't quote me on that. But if you take a look through our docs, I'm sure you'll find it. It is low-level access, so it does require additional work. But if you really need real-time performance, that'll get you closer to it.
Cool. Let's see. We've got a question from Daniel in Berlin. He asks, given that he needs a regular alarm using the Alarm Manager in different apps with intervals shorter than 15 minutes, so 5 minutes, for example, is there a way to get the same power-saving behavior of inexact repeating, but with with intervals shorter than 15 minutes?
I think the answer is no.
Mm-hmm.
So looking through the docs, they explicitly list the allowed time intervals. 15 minutes is the shortest one there. Part of the reason we do that is because the system goes and will collect alarms from different activities and try and merge them together into single events that fire. So that way, if you have 3 apps that each request an alarm at 15 minutes, but they request them, just slightly before and after each other, right? You're going to go and wake the device up, 3 separate times or however many separate times, once for each app, right? But if they're close, you can go and just fire all 3 at the same time. And that's what the system does to go and try and improve your performance there, try and improve battery life.
I think we're back. I hope we're back. Okay, so we're back in the Hangout at least. Yeah, we're back in the Hangout now. It says that we're still broadcasting.
Hopefully you guys are seeing the right video feed.
Exactly.
Fred, you might actually open up a window and check and see what's actually broadcasting live. Sometimes when this happens, the controls.
Now you guys are good.
Okay, we're good.
Cool.
Awesome. All right, nice work, Hangouts. And thank you for the feedback. Okay, where were we? Yes, you were discussing the fact that anything less than 15 minutes.
Ah, yes, alarms, right. Thank you. So basically the short version is that the reason why you get power savings there is because it's going to coalesce in these events, and as you go and make those time intervals shorter, not only does that become harder to do, you're just waking the phone up more often anyway, and you're going to hurt battery life. Yeah, so I don't think there's any way to do it. Yeah,
once you're talking about 5-minute intervals, there's not a lot that you can phase shift to. You're already being inefficient. You're already destroying battery life. So there's not much. If they're all your apps, so if you know that your apps and they work together and that they should be updating it around that frequency, you might be able to use things like broadcast intents to notify each other of a planned update, so that you can then hold off the actual, so you can essentially batch them yourself. In the same way that the inexact repeating alarm would work, but yeah, there's no system feature which would let you do that.
Yep. Also, you haven't said why you're trying to wake up more often than 15 minutes, but if you're doing this to try and fetch data off the network, you could also look at C2DM. So C2DM is our push messaging framework. It'll allow servers to go and wake up devices remotely to go and send the messages, and then they can do additional processing as well. And that way, you don't even have to go and set an alarm. Just have you push a message to the device, wake it up, have it do any processing as needed.
Yeah, 5 minutes is really aggressive. You're gonna find that has really bad effects on your battery really quickly.
Yeah.
15 minutes, frankly, is too often for an app which is regularly doing that. The other thing you can try and do as well, which might be useful, is to set non-wake alarms. So you set that for 5 minutes, but only if the phone is already awake. It's still not a great idea to have alarms which update that frequently, but at least that way you're not physically turning the device CPU on in order to do your updates. That's something to consider. All right, we've got a bunch of people in the Hangout. Do any of you guys have live questions that you would like to put to us?
Yeah, I have a question.
Shoot.
So 2 questions. First of all, so there's an app called Timed Tasks, and you guys were speaking a little bit about this earlier, about how you weren't sure if you can put something on to airplane mode by force. You can. This app does it well, but whenever you come out of it, it says it's off of it, but it actually doesn't show any service. So I'm not sure if that's a problem with the programming or whatever.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I would suggest that if they're forcing it into airplane mode without a user sort of action to enable that, then they're probably doing something sneaky.
They're probably calling a private API.
Probably, and that's probably why they can't effectively. It doesn't sound like they can effectively turn it back off airplane mode afterwards. So that may
Right.
be why you're finding that connectivity is broken after the app supposedly puts it back into normal mode. So
Right. Well, once you manually turn it off airplane mode, everything works fine though.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
And
so
then,
it sounds like they've found a hidden method that will work one way, but then doesn't work in reverse. So yeah,
Right.
it's a good example of why hidden methods can be a little dangerous.
And then one other thing that I just can't resist from asking. So the new Google Drive app that just came out, do you think that an instant upload feature will ever be kind of like how Dropbox does?
It's a good question. I have no idea. Again, our time machine prevents us from being able to answer effectively. But there is a developer relations team around Google Drive, and they may have some insight into some of the features which the app has or may have in the future. But chances are they're not going to be willing to tell you what's in the
Right.
roadmap.
Right.
Question.
All right, thank you very much.
It
Yeah,
sounds like
totally.
an awesome feature.
It really does. Yeah.
I'll put in a feature request for that.
Yeah, what exactly does that do?
Instant upload, so you drop a file into the folder, like the way the Dropbox works. You drop a file into the folder, and then it would just appear on Google Drive.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Which, yeah, I think that'd be.
You already have it for Google Plus, but I think a lot of users I've heard want to have that available for Google Drive. I feel like there's some redundancy, how there's an instant upload folder that's not also present in Google Drive, and also they feel as though that there's not a music folder in Google Drive that connects with Google Music, so I think they're kind of trying to integrate it all.
That'd be a cool idea.
Interesting, yeah.
That would
Yeah.
also be a cool idea, yeah.
I like the idea of integrating
Yeah.
all of the different functionality together.
Right,
so
right.
Yeah.
all the cloud is all together in one place.
I think the only challenge with respect to music is that Google Music doesn't really organize it in sort of a file system hierarchy. It's just sort of the several thousand songs that you organize, that you search.
It'd still be nice to be able to drop it into one
Yeah,
Google Drive folder labeled music, and it just knows to stick it into Google.
I mean, it's already been combined with Docs, so, you know.
right,
It also makes it very easy to get my music off of Google Music.
right.
That's true. All right, yeah, cool. No, they're great ideas. We'll definitely
Yeah.
send them on to the teams in
All right,
question.
thank you.
Totally.
Let's see. Let's have a quick look on Moderator. I am targeting Honeycomb for USB hosts, and I am concerned about the current adoption rate of Ice Cream Sandwich. Is there a current remedy for getting USB hosts on Gingerbread phones? I'm looking for something warm and fuzzy from you guys about ICS. This is from Chris in Boise. Okay, so I guess given that you want us to say something warm and fuzzy about ICS, the thing about adoption rates for the newest version of the software is that they always start off pretty slow and then ramp up really, really quickly. So yeah, like within the first, how long is it usually? 3 months, 6 months? There's usually a certain sort of ramp up where all the different manufacturers and carriers are getting the new software, making sure it works on their phone, putting it through all the QA processes, and then suddenly they push it out to a bunch of their existing handsets and obviously all of their new ones as well. Obviously Honeycomb was kind of a special case in that it was never developed for phones specifically. So ICS, I think you're going to see come out on a lot of different devices, phones and tablets, both new and old. So we don't have any specifics, but based on prior experience, I would expect to see that ramping up really quickly and probably quite soon, based on when ICS came out. Yeah.
I think this device Trevor has actually runs ICS.
It does indeed.
I saw a little ICS icon on the box, and this is a device it's not a Nexus, it's not a Google designed device.
No.
It's a totally third party that actually runs MIPS that I'd never seen before today.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, like Reto said, there's a certain amount of latency that I think sometimes gets mistaken for lack of interest from the hardware manufacturers, but especially because we we typically release a device, like we release the ICS device, like I want to say a month or maybe a couple weeks or something like that before we release the source code. And then once they get the hands on the source code, then, there's all the testing and stuff that Reto described.
Yeah,
but
it's definitely coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no, like with Honeycomb, that was kind of a thing. It's like we knew it wasn't going to be on phones. We knew there was going to be a certain, difficulty there. But that's kind of the whole point of ICS, is to bring everything together and get as many phones as possible running the same version.
I would say also we maintain a pie chart on the developer site that has the breakdown of Android users by platform version. And let's see, Gingerbread was released last December, and now it's ubiquitous. So I just as a data point.
It's only December.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was like a year and change ago.
Wait, yeah,
so.
It feels a year.
December, December before last December.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, where did all the time go?
Right.
How did we do 4
so,
releases in 3 months? No.
So like 14 months ago, and now it's completely ubiquitous.
Yeah. We're looking at it at the moment. What have we got here?
Right.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah. So Gingerbread is like, yeah.
Yeah.
63
So somebody was asking if USB host was actually added in Gingerbread, and just to double check, it looks like we added host mode in Android 3.1, so that is Honeycomb. Yeah, but that does bring up another good point here, though, too, about USB, which is if you want to go and use USB and you are concerned about compatibility, a better option is USB accessory mode. And so there's first off, I think USB host mode, even on newer devices, is optional, right? The device has to support something like USB on the go.
Yeah.
But USB accessory mode will work on any device, going back to, I can't remember how far back it goes, at least Gingerbread for sure, but I think, does it go on older devices? Fred will have to check for me.
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
But, so USB accessory mode is sort of interesting in that it runs the device in reverse. So your accessory is actually the USB host, and the Android device is, in USB slave mode like it normally would be. The OS has a special protocol that's used to talk to the devices, which also actually, I think even in host mode you can have your app pop up. But accessory mode, mostly, it gives you a lot of options as far as compatibility is concerned. So, yeah, certainly something to look into. And if you just want to play around with it too, we do have the Android Accessory Development Kit, as well as many similarly compatible devices which speak the Open Accessory Protocol. My favorite one is a little board called Yo-Yo, IOIO, which it's a little teeny board about this big, like the size of a pack of gum. Nice. And yeah, you just plug it into your device, and you get tether pins for whatever accessories you want to go and wire up. Cool. And actually, one really cool thing I should mention about that board too, if you buy a little Bluetooth dongle, just like a little cheap, like $20 thing that you'd buy for a mouse or something, the latest version of the Yo-Yo firmware has essentially an implementation of Open Accessory over Bluetooth. You just pair the devices together, and then whatever code you wrote will suddenly start working with the Yo-Yo over Bluetooth.
That's very cool.
It's very cool.
Awesome.
I like that.
Yeah, so that's actually built by another engineer here in Mountain View. So, cool. Yeah.
That's definitely something to check out. Okay, let's have a look. I got a question from Young Shaky on the stream. He says he'd like to create a Google Plus app using the Google Plus APIs, like the Friendcaster app for Facebook. Can I do this, or could he do this? I think that comes down to figuring out what APIs are available for Google Plus. I don't think that there is an API to allow you to write to the stream.
No.
No.
There is. So that may be tricky. I'm not sure what the Friendcaster app for Facebook does. So if it's reading streams, then that may be something possible. If it's writing as well, then probably not.
The Friendcaster app is the exact same thing as the Facebook. It's just updated a little bit with a different UI.
Oh, cool. So it's just an alternative Facebook implementation.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably not. You probably can't do that for Google Plus because there's no way to write to the stream. But if you do want to get more information about that, there is a Google Plus developer relations team as well, and they also do office hours like these weekly. In fact, I think they do them at Wednesday at 11:30. I think that's right. It was earlier today. So check them out on Google Plus, and maybe send them a line, and they'll be able to give you more info on exactly what's possible with the API. Let's see, a question For me, oh good. Is there a way to get the new Android development book in digital copy outside the US? I will answer that offline. Okay, I have a particular doubt in regards to the recognition algorithm used by the gesture overlay component. Does the component only as a version of 4 use the protractor algorithm, or is it also supported by older versions?
So I think that's more of an implementation question, and probably not something we're the best folks to answer. You'd want to speak to the engineers who actually wrote the gesture recognition stuff.
Right, or barring that,
Look at the source code.
Look at the source,
Look at the
yeah.
source code.
Yes,
So
it is
always
open
an
source. You can find it. You can take a look.
Yeah, our engineers are hard-working people, and sometimes it takes less time to dig through and find the source code than it does to track them down.
And wait for them to reply to your email.
And wait for them to reply, yeah.
Which is for the best. We welcome coding.
And that's actually kind of a good tip as well. Like when you're contacting anyone, but particularly the engineers who are working on things, should you have the opportunity to speak to them, the more specific you can be, the more you can show that you've already sort of looked yourself and couldn't find an answer, the easier it is for them to respond in a meaningful way. I think a lot of the times if you just go, hey, I couldn't figure this out, and you haven't sort of done any research, then they'll be sort of less inclined to spend time trying to help answer. So that's a particularly good tip for those of you who are coming along to I/O this year, because there will more than likely be some Android engineers around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the more specific, the more research you've done, the more likely they are to really get stuck in and try and get some deep dives on your questions.
And I gotta say, I/O this year is looking like it's gonna be pretty cool.
It is.
I'm
looking forward
excited.
to it. And just so that you guys who aren't coming know that you're not being excluded, everything's going to be, there's going to be ways to watch a lot of the content online as well, so it's going to be really exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's have a look. Let's see, Greg from Atlanta. He says the documentation for the gradient drawable attribute states it's available since API level 1, but it only displays correctly in Eclipse at API level 7. Is this just a problem with the Eclipse plugin? I have screenshots if that helps.
Possibly. I mean, if you use it and you run it on a device running at API level 1, what happens? I
can answer this. I know that it does work.
Okay.
I've done this. So yeah, it sounds like it's just an Eclipse problem, because I've definitely experimented with gradient drawables at API level 1. Yeah, 0.9 and 1. And everything since. So yeah, that sounds like it's an Eclipse thing.
So one very nice thing about the way Android does its emulation is it's actually a real emulator. So it's emulating by default it'll emulate an ARM processor running the same Android source code we run, or the same Android binary images we place on phones. So if you're ever in doubt as to how something works, just create an emulator at the API level you want and take a look, and that'll give you for pretty much everything, with a few exceptions like, say, sensors, where of course it's very difficult to go and emulate a gyroscope on a computer, right? You don't want to be spinning your
Although that
laptop
works now. The latest emulator.
Oh, does it?
Lets
You
you.
can spin your laptop around?
No, it lets you plug in your own device.
Oh yes, you can
use
use
that as the sensor input.
Okay, though it'd be interesting if we actually use like the hard drive accelerometers.
That would be interesting.
Someone wrote an app once that would make lightsaber noises when you swung your laptop
Yes,
around.
I've seen that.
I can't even estimate how much damage, like how many dollars of damage that man did with that just awesome little app.
Yeah, it's actually an API in HTML5 now too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You can write web apps that'll use the accelerometer that's in your laptop just for they're in there normally so you can detect when you drop them, but it can be used for other things. And of course it works on phones as well. So.
Yeah.
As far as I know, I've never tested it.
It was surreal with the laptops. So the game studio I worked for, like production ground to a halt for half a day as people were having like laptop battles in slow mo. It was a little absurd, but it was pretty awesome. And you can do that now.
That's right. Power is yours. Use it wisely. All right, another question from Greg. How do I create a project targeting compatibility back to Google API level 7+, that's Android 2.1 with Google Maps, with the support library, seeking confirmation of best practices for min and target SDK settings?
So if you want to go and target going back to level 7, that makes min SDK very easy. That should be 7, right? Now, as far as target, our recommendation is usually set target equal to whatever API you're currently developing against. So typically that's going to be the latest SDK that's available.
Hopefully that's 15.
Yes.
Yeah.
Assuming you've downloaded it, and you should, it'll be 15.
Yeah, and in fact,
Or if you're watching a pre-recorded version of this, then it might be 16 now. Who knows?
exactly. Whenever it happens to be that you're watching this,
Yes.
there's actually very little risk in compiling against and setting the target SDK for the newest version of the OS, and a lot of benefits. So the big benefits is things like what we like to call the menu button of shame. So a lot of apps will have a menu button which appears even though you're using action bar and everything else, just because you haven't set the target SDK high enough. And then you just change that and miraculously it goes away and everything kind of works. Which is kind of the point of the way a lot of the development goes for Android. The idea is to make sure that everything just works when a new version comes out. Which doesn't mean that you shouldn't be testing, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be improving, because with each new version of Android there's new libraries, there's new APIs which you're able to use to make things better. But even without making any changes, a lot of the time you can get a lot of benefit just by changing the target SDK.
Yep. And it's actually even easier now too, because we've added linter support, which will give you a linter warning when you use APIs that could potentially be a problem, and make sure that you go and wrap those with code to handle backwards compatibility properly.
Very nice. Yeah, lint's really useful for that. It'll help you to avoid a lot of the easy gotchas that you do just by not thinking things through when you're sort of in the flurry of first coding.
Yeah. Now, all that said, there is one thing about this question which I noticed, and the person said they were using the version of Android with Google Maps support. And there is something to watch out for there, and that is if you're using support fragments, I believe you don't have access to, is it map activity that it's called? Or you don't have access to map fragments.
Right. If you're using the support library, then yeah, you have to derive your activities from fragment activity. I think.
Yeah,
It means that you
it's
can't
fragment
derive
activity.
it from map activity, which is a requirement to be able to use map use.
Right.
That's a good point.
So yeah, in that case, probably what I do is, actually this is going to be really tough. Probably what I recommend in that case is, if you are running on a device that needs to go and display, or sorry, if you're running on a device that doesn't have access to map fragment, have a button to go and pop up the map in a transparent activity.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You still won't be able to display it in a fragment on older devices, but you'll be able to get something that's not too obtrusive.
Yeah, and part of the interesting thing, I mean, you'll definitely lose the advantage of being able to reuse fragments across multiple activities if you do what I'm about to suggest, but most of the case, well, in almost all of the cases, the devices which are pre-Honeycomb are phones, which means that there's less need to have multiple fragments on screen, so you can just have your map activity as a separate thing, and then you can have separate activity which has your map plus whatever else you want for tablets which are running Honeycomb and above. So it's not ideal. There's a bit of duplication. It's not quite as neat, but at the moment that's kind of the best way forward, I guess, until we get past Gingerbread being the dominant platform.
We have a couple questions online. So.
Okay, yeah, we have a couple of questions. So one from Matthew and one from Josh. We'll start with you, Matthew. You've written, could you copy the fragment activity source code and make it extend map activity?
That was actually just, I had another question, but that was in reply to what you guys were previously talking about.
Gotcha. Yeah, it gets really complicated. So I know that there are some third-party libraries which attempt to do this sort of thing, but it's non-trivial and it tends to result in bad things happening. So yeah, I would probably recommend against that kind of approach at the moment, at least.
Okay.
What other question did you have?
Yeah, so when, obviously a lot of our apps, we target the most recent version of the SDK and then provide a min SDK back to, let's say, 2.1 or 2.2. I find that even if I am using a hollow theme and I put the minimum SDK version back to 2.2, it uses the old widgets and not the hollow widgets. Have you guys ever experienced that?
Yeah, so it uses the old widgets on every platform or just on the old platform?
On which devices do you see this?
On Galaxy Nexus, and it is on all platforms. So on the Galaxy Nexus 4.0, I see the old widgets show up, even though I have the Holo theme on.
What are you setting the target SDK to?
4.0, so 15.
I don't know what that would be.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry, can you go through that process again for me? I'm not quite sure how that makes sense.
Sure. So I make an app, set the theme to Holo, and then so I set the target SDK to 4.0, so API level 15, and I set the min SDK to 7. If I run it on 4.0, it shows the old widgets rather than the Holo widgets.
Interesting. And if you change the min SDK to something other than 7, then it shows.
If I change it to 11, which would be Honeycomb, it does show the Holo widgets.
That's unexpected.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to see that for ourselves to try and figure out what's going on. So we'll take that as an action item off the back of this and go and make a sample project which just does exactly that. Are you seeing it for anything other than, when you say widgets, you mean like home screen widgets, yeah?
Oh, no. Sorry, I meant like views, like buttons, spinners, stuff like that.
Or anything like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that should be easier to test. All right, yeah, let us look into that. That seems surprising. It seems like maybe something else is going on, or I feel like we would have run into that earlier.
That seems contrary to the way that I have seen it work. So.
So yeah, let us look into that. Yeah, we'll get back to you as well if we're not seeing it happen straight away, or I guess either way. Once we've looked into it, we may want to get back in touch with you to get a little bit more information as to exactly what's happening, just in case we can't replicate it ourselves.
Yeah, it just came up, so I think I might. I'll test it again. I might file a bug report if I still have it.
Oh yeah, and do ping Android developers as well, so we can keep track of it that way too.
Cool. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, man. Josh, you had a question?
Yeah, mine was with regards to gradient drawables, specifically declaring them in XML, and dealing with radial gradients. Basically, when you set the radius, the actual attribute is an int rather than a dimension, and so density scaling becomes kind of tricky, especially since I don't think it'll even take references, so I can't just declare that in the values XML. I actually have to have separate copies of each one. Is there a better approach to that?
It's a really good question. So I noticed this myself a little while ago and mentioned it to someone. And their suggestion was that it's using that pixel value only for effectively to provide a baseline for a relative radius size. Have you actually tried it out to see whether it does get bandy and bad looking on higher res devices, or if it just magically scales? So I have a suspicion that it treats it like a dip, even though it's asking for it as a pixel. But I haven't tried it out myself. I may have lost Josh. We will try that out. So I'm not sure, because I agree that seems like it's a bug, or it seems like there's an oversight there.
Yeah, for some reason it remuted me. No, I was trying it out, and it definitely behaves like pixels. I tried on higher res devices. It actually does get smaller, like physically smaller, meaning it no longer fits my assets, which are defined in div.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that is what I initially suspected. So yeah, so I guess the answer is that there isn't a really great best practice for that. You would just have to create multiple drawable XMLs. Trying to use, I guess you can probably use references for the colors, so that you can end up just defining the colors in one place and then having multiple drawables with different gradient radiuses.
Right.
Isn't a great answer, but I think it's the best we've got at the moment.
I think it.
All right. I think that takes us up to.
It's exactly 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock on the dot. Perfect. So thank you everyone who joined us on the Hangout. It's great to get the live questions. So. Yeah, thanks very much for participating, and to everyone watching, thank you very much for watching. We're here every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. We have the moderator queue. It's the same, should be the same queue next week. So do continue to throw your questions in there, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can next week.
That said, the queue will have just locked itself. So once you go and clear that, we'll unlock it.
We will unlock it as soon as it's empty. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So come back to it later today. The video for this, fingers crossed, will be available later today or tomorrow, barring any technical difficulties, which aren't uncommon at the moment with Hangouts. So do bear with us. But in any case, thank you for watching, and we'll see you all next week.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.